Hi everyone and welcome. Today I want to talk a little bit to you about how you can eat a high quality, nutrient dense carnivore diet on a budget. When we think meat, we often think that it's really expensive to eat a lot of meat. So people who are on a ketogenic diet, they think we're a little bit crazy. If we want to go on a carnivore diet, how are we going to be able to afford that with all that meat? In reality, eating a lot of vegetables is actually a lot more expensive. If you do the calculations, you go and check the prices, how much you're eating, especially if you're eating 5 portions per day or more of vegetables, that is going to be quite expensive. Somehow we think that we need to eat 3 kilos of meat every day, and that's not the case. We don't actually have to overeat. Today, I think many people overeat in general, and we don't need to do that necessarily. So I'm going to show you how you can eat pretty much twice as much as I eat on a daily basis if I am a perfect carnivore for less than $250 per day. And it might sound crazy and you think, how are you going to get quality for that? But I'm going to show you exactly how. I'm going to give you a real example of what I have had, as you might have seen on the thumbnail. That's actually what I'm going to talk about. And I'm going to give you a few suggestions for other cuts of meat and different things that you can do to try and source high quality protein sources, etc. And basically this has cost me, if the calculations that I'm going to do is $4 New Zealand dollars or $235 US dollars. That's the conversion rate today. With COVID running loose, that conversion rate might vary on a day-to-day basis, obviously, but roughly in that sort of ballpark. But before I go ahead, I would like to kindly ask you to subscribe to the channel, give the video a thumbs up, and hit the subscribe button down there. And if you're already subscribed but you haven't hit the bell, do that, because then you will get a notification every time I go live or every time I upload a new video. You don't want to miss the live sessions because you get a chance to ask whatever you want, and I will do my very best to try and answer your questions. And besides, sometimes I might enjoy having someone on live. So if you are liking being on camera, you can just check it out and see what's going on and volunteer. Okay, so first of all, I got to say that I'm fortunate now to live in a city where we have several butchers, and it's actually usually quite easy for me to get hold of quite cheap quality meat, of a decent quality anyway. But I thought I would make an effort to see how cheap I could actually make it, just because so many people, it's almost like it's the last hurdle, or we have an objection to going carnivore because we think that it's going to be super expensive. And I don't want that to be something that is standing in the way for you going on a carnivore diet, if that is what you want to do. I'm not saying everyone has to be a carnivore, but if if that is what you want to do, I'm just going to show you how you can do it very, very cheap. So you can find a lot of eating carnivore on a budget diet videos out there, and most of them suggest things like grain-fed beef mince, eggs from caged hens, and that sort of thing. And I don't consider either of these to be high quality, and that is because the eggs, or the chickens that lay the eggs, if they are caged, they are only eating the grains that they're being fed. It's usually not the best quality grains. These eggs are going to be much higher in omega-6 than free-range hens that get to roam and eat bugs and worms and that sort of thing. They're going to be less nutrient dense, etc. So they're still okay to eat, but now I'm talking about high quality, how we can do that on a budget. So I just want to make you aware of that. And the beef mince, I don't know if I need to say this, but beef being fed grains, the grains that they're being fed definitely know not the best quality that you can get your hands on. So they will also have a much worse omega-6 to 3 ratio. If you have mold growing on those grains, the cows will consume mold toxins. All those yucky things that are on the grains, even pesticides that come from the grains, will end up in the cows and the cow fat specifically, most likely. So when you have ground beef or minced meat, whatever you want to call it, sometimes you can find very lean mince, but most of the time there's a decent amount of fat in, which is good if it's good quality fat. But when you find the cheap ones in the supermarkets, it's usually not very good quality. So that's why I don't want to recommend that, because of that, for that simple reason. If you're gonna mince something, make sure that it's some good quality meat. Okay. And if you want a better breakdown of the fat quality between grain-fed and grass-fed cows, I suggest that you go and check out my video from last week. I posted a video called Saturated Animal Fats that you can find there. And if I remember, I will put it up by the end of this video so you can click it. We'll see if I can remember that. So a couple of weeks ago, I contacted my butchers, or one of the butchers in town, the one that I go to most often, and I asked them if they had grass-fed beef suet and grass-fed beef heart. And it turns out that they stock both of these regularly. I didn't know that. I've never seen them on the shelves, and the reason I haven't seen them on the shelves is probably because they are quite cheap. So this is pretty much what I got. So there's some ox heart or beef heart, and that was $4.99 a kilo. I got 6-7 kilos of that, I think, and that's beef suet, and it's all grass fed, $7.99 a kilo. They actually told me $7.49, but whatever, it's still cheap. And I did ask them to grind up 2.5 kilo of ox heart for me so that I could make some beef heart burgers. Okay, so the beef heart, as you saw, is roughly $5 per kilo. That's New Zealand dollars. And the beef suet is almost $8 per kilo. So the beef suet is a little bit more expensive. That's usually the case, not all the time, but I would bet my money on that is the case for most people and most butchers. So you can still get a lot of food for that price, can't you? And that's actually what's on the thumbnail. That is beef heart and it's beef suet. Before I took the picture, I unfortunately ate a lot of the suet, so it looks like I didn't have a lot of it, but it's really, really yummy, so I just ate it before I got the idea that maybe I should take a picture of this. So if you're one of these people that you're scared of, or you're unsure about organ meats because you don't really eat them because you don't like them and they taste a little bit yucky, or they have a yucky consistency, or whatever it is, whatever your reason is for not eating organs, you really should try beef heart. That it's really, really beautiful meat. It's the difference, as I see it, is that beef heart is much more dense than any other type of steak. So it's hard to describe, but it's very dense. So when you cut into it, it's almost like if you could meatify a pate or something, that is what you will get. But the taste is very steaky. It just tastes like meat. Now, all cuts of meat, if you're eating beef, you probably will recognize the flavor of beef and you will say this is beef. But all cuts of beef have a little bit of a different flavor, and I guess that is true for the heart as well. But to me, it's very, very steaky. It tastes really nice. The only thing I do differently is that I actually cook it a little bit more than I cook normal muscle meat, which I like blue. And then I cut it quite thin, because sometimes you have a little bit of stringy stuff depending on where in the heart you are. So I don't like to chew on that too much, so I just cut it thin and I just eat them, and it's perfect. So with a beef suet, I think that is absolutely perfect. If you're hardcore, you can eat it raw. I can't do that. I tried a little bit, but it didn't feel right to me. I didn't really taste nice. I didn't have a lot of it, and I thought, I'll start with frying it and see if I can move there later. But if you're hardcore, you can just do it raw, which is fine. I'm putting it in the air fryer for about 5 minutes on the highest heat. So unfortunately, even after 5 minutes, quite a lot of fat is actually dripping out of this. So this is beef drippings, or what do we call it in the UK? Anyway, I can't remember what it's called, but beef drippings, everyone knows what that is. So what I do is that I just pour it off into a container like this. So I'm just making a point of collecting it into this pot, and then I'm using it whenever I'm frying something. Or what I did the other day is I tried to make a liver pate, and usually you are meant to be using cream and butter and blah blah blah. So I had some clarified garlic butter left over that I used. I used my chicken livers, and I used a lot of the beef drippings, a little bit of salt, and a little bit of thyme that I found out in the garden. That was it, and it's tasting amazing actually. That is the best pate I have ever made, and I didn't really follow a recipe. I took 50-50 roughly in weight, fat and liver, and it's good. So I'm not very good with following recipes, so I'm gonna try to make it again with the some other sort of liver and see how that actually turns out. Speaking of liver, just to make a point of making this meal that I'm going to show you in a second even more nutrient dense and pretty much foolproof of criticism, I have chosen to add a little bit of liver into my calculations. So I went to the supermarket today, and it is crazy. I had to queue outside the supermarket for 15-20 minutes before they will let me in, because they have a limited amount of people they let into the shops today. This is the first day that is like that, and inside you're not allowed to buy more than 2 of anything. And I was stopped at the checkout because I had 3 packets of liver that no one ever buys because they always have plenty of liver but I wasn't allowed to buy 3 packets, so I had to buy just 2. Anyway, so this liver is actually the most expensive out of the cuts that we are looking at today, at $8.49 per kilo. Still pretty cheap, I would say. So let's have a look at what we can eat for $235 or $4 New Zealand dollars per day. So we can eat 500 grams of grass-fed beef heart, 150 grams of grass-fed beef suet, and 50 grams of lamb liver. Now, they didn't have any beef liver, otherwise I probably would have bought that, and I think that is usually a little bit cheaper than lamb's liver. But this is what I've been calculating. So, if we're looking at what we get for that, the macros and the energy that we're getting roughly 1900 calories, 101 grams of proteins, 163 grams of fat, and 1.4 grams of carbs. And the carbs are mainly actually from the liver because of the glycogen that is stored in the liver. Now, I just want to say this because many of you might not know this, but when you are eating meat, you are getting your vitamin C daily need actually met by the meat itself. So in 500 grams of beef heart, you roughly get 10 milligrams of vitamin C, and it's not too much different from other muscle meat. I just want you to keep that in mind. There's a lot more in liver, which is one of the reasons I added it, but also for the other vitamins and minerals that are in liver, so that no one can come and tell me that we're lacking this or that and that. Okay, so if you want to know what sort of percentages these are, I just put this together quickly for you. So 78% fat, 22% of protein, and it says 0% of carbs, but it's actually 0.3. so it just rounded it down to 0. So obviously if you want a little bit more protein, you can up the beef heart or the liver. If you want more fat, you can up the beef suet. Now, when I'm eating it, as I said, the beef suet is pretty much leaking a lot of fat, so I might add more than that on a daily basis when I'm using beef suet as my main fat source, because a lot of it is collected in my little pot, so I'm not getting as much as I think I'm getting it. So all of these values are from the raw produce, basically. So the more you cook it, the more minerals, etc., you're going to lose, but you're obviously not going to lose any protein or fat. You're losing fat out of beef suet, but not much from the heart, because there isn't a lot of fat in the muscle meat of the heart. There is a lot of fat around the heart, which you can also eat if you want, as long as it's grass-fed. It's all good. Okay, so even if you were one of these people who who need to eat 3,500 calories per day or whatever, you can still eat a high quality carnivore diet for less than $5 per day, eating this way, as long as you're mindful of what you're doing and where you're shopping. So there are obviously other ways of sourcing high quality carnivore foods as well, but I just wanted to kind of put this out there, because a lot of the time people say, I can't afford doing this, I can't afford doing that, and it's too expensive. But if you start to ask around, you can actually find a lot of things that you might not find if you're not asking. Just talking to people usually helps. So you can always ask your butcher for grass-fed beef heart, or if you think that the beef suet's too expensive, you can always ask them for grass-fed beef fat. So they often get like fat offcuts when they're preparing the meats that they're packaging, because no one will buy the steaks when they have a huge amount of fat on them. So they usually cut it off to make it a bit less, and then they don't know what to do with that fat, so they throw them away. Very much, that's probably the most likely scenario, unless they have a backup plan. Some butchers may mince it down with some meat to make dog food or whatever. So a lot of the time you can get it really, really cheap, or you can get it for free. And you probably get it for free if it's a small butcher and you buy all your meat there and you have a good connection with them. Probably give you things like that for free. You can also ask them what other cuts they have. If you say, okay, this is my budget, I want to be able to eat for $5 a day, you're gonna buy something for $35 and you need a certain amount of meat, you go to the butchers and you say, okay, I have $35, how much meat can I get? This much meat for $35. What sort of meat would I have to buy to be able to buy this, so that I can eat all week on this budget? And they might be able to help you out there, and they might have something that they can order in that is really cheap that week or whatever. You never know if you're not asking. And there are other cheap cuts that are always cheap, pretty much, and that's chuck steaks. You have brisket, and sometimes ox cheeks. I've noticed that the demand for ox cheeks seems to have gone up a little bit. And brisket and ox cheeks are both things that you would probably put in a slow cooker and cook for a longer period of time. I prefer my meat almost raw, or even as I told you, the beef heart is actually fine to eat, not blue, but just ask them for whatever you like. Many people do love brisket, and I don't mind brisket, but I wouldn't want to eat it every day of the week. I prefer beef heart 10 times. So just ask. That's the absolute best way of doing it if you have a butcher. If there's a supermarket, there's usually someone in charge of the meat section that you can actually go and talk to as well. So we don't always have to eat the most expensive cuts of meat to get good quality meat. So when I'm talking quality, I'm talking about the quality of the animal that you are actually eating, in terms of nutrient density and as little toxins as possible and as good fat profile as possible, etc. But as I always say, if you have a limited amount of money and you can only afford to eat grain-fed beef, get the lean cuts. Okay? Don't go and buy grain-fed ribeye or grain-fed 20% fat minced meat or something like that, because you're getting a lot of bad quality fat with that. Now, having said that, beef fat isn't the worst fat in terms of the fat profile, but these animals might have been sick and they might have been eating a lot of different kind of toxins from the grains. So you never really know what you're getting. Some people might not notice something and they might be fine eating that way, but a lot of people will react to that and they will not feel good doing that. So if you instead can just get a really lean cut of meat that is cheap and is grain-fed, that is fine. And then you go to your butcher and you're asking them for grass-fed offcuts. Beef, grass-fed fat offcuts, say. Or beef suit if you can afford that, but that's obviously depending on your budget. So there are ways around it. You just have to engineer your own meat, cheap grain-fed meat, cheap or free grass-fed fat, and voila, you have your meal there. And eggs are always, semi-cheap. Even the more expensive eggs are actually quite cheap for what you get for them. The nutrients that you get in the egg yolk is good, good proteins in there. So there's always an option, but as I say, preferably free range. There's always better quality. And as I've shown you, you can get high quality products for very little money if you prepare to eat cuts of meat that most people wouldn't even consider. And why not? Beef heart is brilliant because it tastes really, really good as well. So I hope you have found this video useful or helpful in some sort of way anyway. And if you did, please share the video with everyone you know who think that it's too expensive to eat a lot of meat, because it really doesn't have to be. Give it a thumbs up as well and subscribe if you haven't done that. And don't forget to press the bell so that you can come and join me on my live streams. So thank you very much for watching, and I will see you again very soon.